Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and you are very welcome to the June garden tour. Now, June has been a funny old month. It has been really sunny. We started off with a spring and an early summer that was wetter than average, and June, certainly from the second half onwards, has been so dry. So we're just dying for a bit of rain here at the moment. But anyway, lots of pretty things to see today in the garden. Peonies in particular, and irises, and all kinds of great things. So come with me and let's have a look at Douentza Garden in June. So you are very welcome to this garden tour, but before we go into the garden, I want to show you my Furcraeas, which are these two, oops, they're dropping flowers, these two giants you see here in front of the house. In the last garden tour video, you'll have seen one of them anyway placed in the garden, but the wind took it down, so I had to place them here. Now, this is a magnificent monocarpic plant that comes from Mexico and places adjacent to that. It has taken me 11 years to get it to flowering size and for it to flower, which it's done this year. Of course, being monocarpic, once it flowers, it dies. But I have all summer to enjoy these fantastic flowers, because the flowers, which are going over now, and a lovely scent they have too, beautiful yellow, green, white flowers, once they finish, the whole plant will produce masses and masses of bulbils, which are a spectacle in themselves. So look out for that on the next garden tour. Everything in the garden is in full leaf now. Spring is definitely finished and summer is underway, and the first of the summer flowers are beginning to make their presence felt in a spectacular kind of way. We start with a pan of this side of the garden because that's where we're going to explore first. Penstemons are just beginning to open up, and this is a plant I absolutely love. It flowers for the longest time and just has masses and masses of blooms. I love doing garden tours on days like this. No rain, although I actually do want rain, but it's just that little bit overcast, because if you've got very sunny weather, it can bleach things out a bit. We'll see how it goes as we go round, because the sun is out and in a bit. I do have shade in the garden, but yeah, it's good. Okay, we're going to go over there now. I guess you might call this the cooler end of the garden, because there's a lot of green going on from the buxus here, which is cloud pruned. So these are just a calming green presence in the garden. And this green is echoed over there. I don't know, can you see? But there's a box circle around the cherry blossom tree. And then by various other presence of box balls in the borders. But what we want to do today is to head over there to have a look at the long border, because my goodness, the long border is really waking up now. I am such a big fan of Alstroemeria, which is the orange flower you see dotted in the long border. Now, this particular one is called Oriana, which is great because it's the name of my daughter. But can you believe it? I had bought this and had it in the garden, and it was a favourite of mine for many years before she decided to rename herself as Oriana. But there you go. Now, the thing about Alstroemeria is that they look really, really exotic with those bright colours and those tiger-like markings in there in the throat. But they are very hardy. They're hardy for me in Ireland now. And I guess our hardiness zone is zone 9, because we very seldom have a winter that goes below -5 degrees centigrade. And I have a variegated sedum in this border as well, which just adds a bit of interest in terms of the leaf. Of course, there will be flowers there. You can even see the flower heads beginning to start now. And speaking of sedums, here's another patch I have here in the garden. And this one is the divil for flopping over at the end of the season. So this year they got the Chelsea chop, and I hope that these will hold themselves upright when the flower spikes come into play. These sedums are in a shadier part of the long border, an arm that sticks up. And this is the spot where we planted Hydrangea Annabelle last year. Now, Annabelle may be small, but she is going to flower this year. There are so many flower heads coming, which is a bit unexpected. I thought because I'd bought a smaller specimen that it might take a little while to get so floriferous. But anyway, come back in just a little while and hopefully we'll have those massive white flowers. One absolute star of the long border so far this year is this geranium. Now, you might think this is Anne Thompson, but no, this is a new variety called Dragonheart, and it has just performed so much better so far than Anne Thompson, who I was an amazingly big fan of up until now. It has larger flowers than Anne Thompson does, and it started into flower earlier, so we'll see how it goes as the season goes on. It's now at the point where I do have to deadhead it slightly, but we will see which gives flowers over the longest period of time as the season goes on. So over here is the classic Anne Thompson, daughter of Anne Fulcard. So Anne Fulcard was the best geranium up until that point, and then Anne Thompson was the best geranium. We'll see where this goes in my garden from here. So here we have a flower from Dragonheart, nice and big, and just to give you an idea of scale, here's one that I picked from Anne Thompson just a bit further up on the border, and you can see that the Anne Thompson flower is half the size of the Dragonheart one. And another plant looking super at the moment is this shocking yellow Achillea. I just love the flatness of the flowers. There's a very horizontal feeling to them. They kind of cut across rather than spike up as so many perennials do. And just look at it over here in an intimate embrace with a variegated Astrantia. Now, I love this Astrantia for its foliage, and there's a yellowish tinge to the variegation which kind of echoes the Achillea. When this one flowers, the flowers are pink, which I think is a slight mismatch, but they're welcome. It's a pale pink, they're welcome. And when they finish, I will then cut the whole plant back to the base, and then it will start regenerating and be fresh as a daisy for the rest of the summer. And just a little bit further over to the right, we have another section of the long border. A couple of things coming into flower here now, including the lilies right at the front. And these are regal lilies that I planted last year, so I'm expecting the place to be awash with scent very shortly. Now, touch wood, I seem to have much less of a lily beetle problem this year than before. So it means probably that going around and picking them off in spring and early summer is finally paying dividends. And a bit further over to the right, we have an Astrantia. This is just a Astrantia I grew from seed years ago, but they are so pretty when they're in flower. Really, really gorgeous things. Pincushion flower, they're called. A great doer, and one that if you just cut it back after it flowers, you get freshness and flowers and exuberance all through the summer. And the Verbascum are in flower. Now, this is the silver-leafed one, bombyciferum, that I love so much. And if you're going to plant Verbascum in your garden, I highly recommend that you stick to just one type, because the problem is that they're promiscuous and they cross-pollinate, with the result that you end up with less pretty Verbascum everywhere in your garden, because the less pretty ones are more dominant and they'll tend to pop up everywhere, and you won't have the beautiful silver foliage one that is just so gorgeous. So that's my advice. Another super Alstroemeria coming into flower now is this one with the dark foliage called Indian Summer, and I love it for the dark foliage. It really is stunning. I'm not so mad about Alstroemeria foliage in general, but I forgive it. I forgive it for being insipid because the plant produces so many flowers. So this one in my garden anyway comes into flower a little bit later than the others. It's coming now. Gorgeous orange and yellow flowers with those tiger throat markings, and then the dark foliage. What's not to love? Oh, the only disadvantage is that this one does need some staking. You may have noticed the clipped yellow bush dotted through the long border, and this is a euonymus. I'm not sure which particular variety because it's been here for, oh goodness, I mean more than 10 years. Very slow growing, but it does lend itself to clipping into a neat shape. So what are we waiting for in this border now? I guess we're waiting for the dahlias and the daylilies. There are a couple of really nice daylilies in here, and of course the sedum to come into bloom. And let's not forget the lilies. Do you remember when I planted these lilies at the back of the border? Well, this is going to be a magnificent year for them, I'm quite sure. And let's not forget this shady section of the long border, which is doing really well, although it could do with a drop of water now at this stage. And do you see at the back there, those purple hardy orchids, the Dactylorhiza? These are the ones I was lamenting I'd planted at the back and we were never going to see them. But when they flowered on tall stems, and we can see them now back there behind the hostas and other things. And just to the right of the Astrantias and the Verbascum, we have Monarda, which is just coming into flower. Now this is one of my all-time favourite perennials. I absolutely love it, and I'm going to have such a show this year. It occurs to me sometimes on these garden tours that you can be a bit confused about the geography of the place. So bear with me a moment while I walk around there and show you the other section of the long border. Here I am, ta-da! So this is a shadier section of the long border, and there's something really quirky going on down here that I have to show you. Now this cute little plant here is a saxifrage, one called stolonifera, and if you go into many garden centres here in Ireland and you look in the house plant section, you're going to see this very plant for sale. Can you believe it? Yet it is perfectly hardy and has done outdoors in my garden for, oh my gosh, 7 years, something like that. But the thing about it is it's a complete little cutie when it's in flower like now. Look at those lovely star-like flowers, a real little gem. And it takes all kinds of terrains as well. When I got this originally, I thought it was for full sun, but it does perfectly well in shade as well. A great little plant. And moving away from the saxifrage, we can see where I was just standing a second ago. So this is a sunnier portion of the border with various plants that like sun, including the tall Sildacea there on the left, which is just coming into bloom. Now when the Sildacea there on the left is in full flower, this is going to be a fantastic view. And down here in the dappled shade of the Circes tree, we have several hardy gingers. Now these are the ones known as Roscoa, and they're a particular passion of mine. I absolutely love them. Doing quite well. The little one down in the centre was in bloom in the last garden tour video, and the others have yet to come. To the right of them, the blue Meconopsis poppy has finished flowering, and I'm not going to deadhead this one because I want to collect the seed and try and grow it from seed. By the way, I moved my variegated Phytolacca last year, and this is where it's living now. But there is just one more little gem I want to show you past the Hypericon that's coming into bloom, and it's right down here at the shady back of this border. And just look over here, look at the gorgeous flowers on this podophyllum. It is just a shame that they hide underneath the leaves. And we'll end our tour of this little section of the garden with just a pan across. So now we're on the other side of that border where the podophyllum was that was hiding its flowers. And you see the wheel there, the wheel that you will have noticed when we first entered the garden that beckoned you down the straight path. But this border here is one that isn't shown so very often. And I do want to let you see it now because it has a couple of gorgeous flowers in it. Now it's hard to miss this gorgeous double peony in full flower, and it's a very large specimen. I've already done the first round of deadheading, so you can imagine it did look even more sumptuous just a little while ago. Now this is one I moved last year. Do you remember I made a video about moving peonies? You saw me move the one that went up beside the greenhouse, but at the same time I also moved this one. I hadn't seen its flowers for years, and I'm so glad I did because they're gorgeous. Of course, because this is such a very old peony, I've lost the label a long time ago. Over here we have a couple of the Japanese water irises that are looking really good at the moment. Now in a wet year like we had earlier on, these do well for me. In a dry year, not so well. My garden conditions really aren't ideal for them, but they've done well this year. So we're just going to take any bit of good luck like that as it comes. The geranium, by the way, is called Summer Skies. Now there are very few hardy geraniums that are also double, so this is one of them. So look out for it. Okay, come on with me. Let's walk up this path. And this is a path we don't normally see from this angle because normally we look at it from this way down. The tree lupin is still pumping out its heady scent and looking really quite well. And those fluffy plumes over there on the right are from the Sobralia. Writing the name up on the screen. Dr. Achillea, one of our resident gargoyles, is looking grumpy as ever. And in here I've planted a number of annuals, which are, well, they're really getting going now. I love this view through the planting over across the other path and to various planting behind. With those sunflowers on the left, with their tantalising flower heads, I really need to stake them. By the way, this lovely Rodgersia, now this is a variety called Herkules, and the thing about it is that the flowers are pink. Some people say that the foliage is meant to be like a bronzy colour. It isn't for me, but the flowers are definitely pink. Up here, the scent from the mock orange behind me is just heady, but we're going to go down here and see what we can find. The grasses at the top and bottom of this path are the New Zealand tussock grass known as Chinchloa rubra, but we have a load of little martagon lilies down here just looking delightful. Now this is the white variety and they do seed about. I don't know if you noticed down the long border, there were definitely some self-seeders down there. Gorgeous, sweet little things that take some shade. And over here, my Amicia bush is making its purplish bracts. I love this plant. It's a perennial rather than a bush really. And it has these purple bracts. Eventually it flowers with yellow pea-like flowers that I think are always a bit incongruous. They don't go with the purple at all and they really look out of place, but it's a lovely thing. Okay, so now we're jungle explorers and we're going to go through there, that path that's completely overgrown with scented mock orange. Let's pretend we're using our machetes to get through to the next part of the garden. Phew, we made it! Here we have more of that geranium, that double geranium called Summer Skies, and a beautiful white campanula. And this border has a lot of peonies earlier on, but the Ito hybrids, the intersectional ones, have gone over now, so there's nothing to see. But I do have a little clip from when they were in flower. And on this side we have the bed where I moved my Sarracenia planters a while ago. You may recall that video. And these have produced massive pictures this year. We still have some of the flowers present, but it's mainly pictures now. The backdrop is the beautiful white scented mock orange and a gorgeous little Douentza called Strawberry Fields. Everyone loves the pink and white flowers on this gorgeous Douentza. When it's in flower, it really is something special. And this shot is for all of you who keep telling me I should try the oak-leafed hydrangea. And this shot is to show you my biggest sambucus, which is the elder. It's a dark-leafed one which has these beautiful pink flowers, fading now, a glorious, glorious scent to it. You can collect the flowers, you can make elderflower cordial out of it, you can make jelly out of the berries later on. But it really is a beast. And you may recall that earlier in the year I made a collaborative video with Granny's Garden and talked about one of the plants I wished I hadn't grown so many of, hadn't planted so many of them. It is the sambucus, because if you don't prune it, that's what you get with many of them. And now it's time to venture up past these gorgeous penstemon here on my left to the stone table. I'm a big fan of this penstemon. When it's in flower, it really does a good show, and I love the bicoloured nature of the flowers. The camea behind it is looking just gorgeous at the moment. This is a plant that is similar to rhododendrons in many ways. So if you manage to grow rhododendrons or azaleas successfully, then you are going to have no difficulty growing this beauty. Another plant worth mentioning is the giant Knautia, or Cephalaria I think it's called, a really, really tall thing that we saw in Penstemon Garden when we visited last year. Isn't it super? And here's a little shot for every one of you who loves the ferns. This is my favourite one, and it is just gorgeous. Such filigree leaves that just softly enhance any shady area in your garden. And just a little bit further along we have a few noteworthy plants, including the tall Meconopsis in the middle with the red flowers on top, looking fantastic. And here's another one I'll definitely be collecting seed from, because I don't want to lose this monocarpic plant when it finishes flowering. It's a monocarpic one, so it will die after it flowers. This soft pink Alstroemeria is called Verona, and it's another one of my favourites. There are just so many glorious Alstroemerias out there. I'm not a fan of the short ones, but anything that's anyway tall, oh my goodness, they're all gorgeous. Just to the right of the Meconopsis is a bush called Pseudoenteria. Somebody always asks about that, so I'm there at the front this time telling you what the name is. This is one that likes acid soil, so it does well for me, and I just trim it ever so slightly after it finishes growing, I guess, in spring. And just up here we have my stone table. It's flanked by a bed of Alstroemeria Oriana, the orange ones, and alliums, and this allium is called Christophii. I think the orange and purple together are sumptuous. By the way, that's my word for the day, sumptuous. Now you may recall when I planted this allium Christophii a while ago. Oh, so many videos you could look back on if you're interested. And the stone table really does beckon. It says, come on over, sit down, no need to be walking around in that heat. Have a cup of tea, play a game, just put your feet up. So after I finish doing this video, that's definitely what I'm going to do. We don't use it enough this year because I have a new grandson, and well, he's usually sleeping at mealtime, which means the parents don't want to bring him out into the garden, which is a shame. So now we're going to go behind me down this spring path, which you'll remember from spring when it had daffodils and all kinds of things in it, because there are some amazing peonies down at the end. Come and have a look. Nearly forgot to show you Hosto Empress Wu. I don't think she's ever been so big. Just look how gorgeous these flowers are and how big. And this is the gorgeous peony called Sarah Bernhardt, who was an actress apparently, and it is very tall. And this one, I can't believe every year how it still flowers, because as this canopy of trees gets bigger and bigger, it's in more shade, and as we all know, peonies like full sun, but it still flowers. It is perhaps getting taller in an attempt to reach for some light, but it still flowers for me, and she's beautiful. So if we come out of that path and go over here, you will find my favourite peony of them all. Look at this one. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now this is a very old peony that I've had for many years. So many years that I've lost the label, so I can't tell you what its name is. It flowers reliably, even in dappled shade, and it produces these enormous white double flowers that are sometimes flecked with raspberry. What's not to love? And now we move over to the green border, where there's a riot of orange going on the right hand side. Here we have a lot of Alstroemeria, and this is the Ligtu hybrids that I talked about before. I mistakenly said it was an annual. It's not an annual, it's a self-seeder. We have some whites too, in the shape of the Dactylorhiza, which you see on the left, and on the right we have another of those iris ensata, the Japanese water irises. The Dactylorhiza flowers just once a year, but it produces such unusual flowers that it's well worth growing. Now this is the iris ensata that does the best for me, given that I don't have particularly wet soil. This one still flowers semi-reliably for me, which is really, really good. So I do recommend it. And over on this side of the garden, it's snowing. It's snowing rose petals because the rambling rector rose is dropping its petals on the lawn. Now this is a giant rose that I have planted up a cherry tree, and it just does a job of work. It provides interest after the tree has stopped flowering. And just to the left of the tree, I can see the mountains in the background. Those are the Wicklow Mountains. Over here I've planted up the new border. You will recall I talked about it earlier, and there are various things in there: dahlias, some annuals, and a gorgeous little lily. Over here we have some of the cornflowers, the annual cornflowers I grew from seed. Well, in spring and September. And this cute little lily is called Gay Lights, which I think is quite appropriate for the Pride month that's in it. So we're over here now beside the greenhouse, and as you will recall, the garden kind of peters out up here to the left. We have a screen put up, and up there at the top is where we have the compost and all that kind of thing. And that, I'm sorry to say, brings me to a rather abrupt end to this video. My battery in the camera ran out, and now the weather has changed. We had the rain. Oh my goodness, did we have the rain. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed what we did cover in the video. We didn't get round to the other side of the garden, but sure, we'll do that another day. Thank you for watching. You can expect a video from me on Sunday, a brief one on the difference between geraniums and pelargoniums. And then at this time next week on Thursday, you will find a full-length video on how and why you should sow biennials. I'll see you then. Bye!